Thank you, mate. Before we jump in, it's going to be 30 seconds. I wanted to introduce myself first and foremost. So I'm Arthur Folliard. I'm the ECD of Koto, New York. If you don't know Koto, we're a branding and digital agency. We've been going around for nearly 10 years now, which is absolutely incredible. We have 5 locations. I'm presenting from New York, but we originally started in London, and then LA, Berlin, and Sydney followed up. I say we worked with around 300 partners, for the past and more for the past 10 years. But we're not going to talk about 300 partners today. We're going to talk about one. I don't know if some of you joined. I think it was already a year ago, right, mates? Yeah, a year ago when we talked about bolts. But last time I did this, I delved into, the process itself, what we do for the immersion, what we do for the strategy, what goes behind the scene really from day one to the completion of the project, and a little bit about our relationship with the client, etc. I'm not going to do that today, but if you're interested, you could always check it out on the website. So yeah, today I am going to focus on something a little bit different, but what I am going to try to do is tell you or give you some insight on how we build brands that are meaningfully different. It's a little bit different than both because today is very much going to be focused on the visual identity. So like the design and how we present different visions and how we take them and make them feel very special. But I say the process is also a bit similar. So meaningful brands, what does it mean? How do we do it? How do we create them so they feel very different and distinctive in this space? For me and the rest of the team, and we'll talk about this in a second, is creating brands and visions that are quite different. Brands that have actually visions and that really stand for something very different in their space. That really think about distinctiveness, that really understand the audience they're talking to, and really understand, the whole story behind all of this. So a little overview of some of the recent project and project to come here. So from Distinction, Meetable, Unicode, I could have presented, 20 more. We have Deezer, we have Call of Duty, we have Fitbit, and many more. I'd say the 3 things that are important when you think about a brand that is meaningfully different is those 3 points. It's sell a vision, make it distinctive, and then you apply it consistently. So starting with sell a vision, what does it mean really? And I'd say that this is very much focused on how we approach first round of creative. You do have to sell a vision. It is about selling a big idea, this big vision, like I said, of the brand, something we think, it should be, it should act, it should look, it needs to be immediate, it needs to feel very emotional. If you present something that is too functional or too pragmatic right at the beginning, but immediately, it's not going to work really well. But you're not selling an unattainable dream. You're not selling something that feels just like graphic design focus. We are in this business to make sense of a brief, a challenge. And so the work that we propose needs to make sense for that business. We need to understand the audience. We need to understand the strategy and the intent behind this project. So it's about function as much as form, really. So when Fluz, a cashback brand, I'm sure a lot of you know about it if you're here today, approached us, I'd say that they were very much facing a lot of challenges, but perhaps the most important one of them all, and we see that, I would say 99% of the time, was the lack of a unified vision. You look at what they were trying to do, and when you don't have a vision, things feels a little bit random. And there's no really reason why they would use this illustration style or this color or this type of communication. It feels just a little bit messy and quite unexpected. We fixed that for sure. And like I said, today, we're not going to talk about the immersion strategy. We're going to jump straight into the visual identity. But we did create a comprehensive strategy, something that was anchored into something that we call the North Star. People sometimes give it a different name, but that's not really the point. But that really represents, the reason why Fluz exists. It embodies the change they aspire to bring to the world. So the North Star for Fluz, if I try to summarize weeks and months of work, was to enable you to maximize your money. Now, if you get cash back on every transaction, every purchase, there's something quite interesting about it where you get money back. So you are maximizing, your spending in general. And we approach the first round of creative with three visions that we're trying to express, this strategy. So the vision number one is called Life on Max. So what we try to do with this first vision is imagine a world where spending money feels very fantastic. You are maximizing your money so you can live your life on max. There's something very emotional about it. And the idea, what we said here was the audience, the customer, us, we get what we want and then we benefit as well. So we were inspired by this world of surrealism, something quite unexpected, quite maximalist, where sort of art meets life, and apply this big idea into everything that we did, into the art direction, into the colors, into the illustration, everything that makes the brand the brand. And so when you go with this vision, you can start with something that maybe is a little bit abstract, as long as it's express, this vision really well. You want to immediately understand what you're trying to do with this brand. And I'd say when you look at this, there is something quite surreal about it. You've got this hand, for example, in this incredibly weird, and wacky background with butterflies and a heart, sort of moving around in clouds, etc. So that's what you're trying to do here. And so what we say to the client is, we call it the Fluz kingdom. Everything is multicolored. Everything is at the max. We're not talking about 99% or 102%. We are talking about 110%. It feels fantastical. It feels good. It feels big. It feels bold. And so that's how you need to approach it. You're not really talking at this moment in time about functionality, product, and what you're trying to do with the emails. It will come in this presentation. We have to sell the dream. You're not selling the dream by being functional first. You need to be quite emotional. You need them to understand what you're trying to do with it. So it's taking all of these elements and bringing them together and trying to create something that feels very special. You go through all the assets for sure. And in this instance, we were thinking about illustration, a really nice assets to actually express this idea of maximization. So at this point onward, there's a bit of work that we do ourselves with our team. We have internal capabilities at Koto. We also find things that really represent this vision. This is not the point where you need to sit down and do it yourself. And so we found this amazing illustrators that was doing things we thought were completely right. At this point, normally the idea is set. They understand what you're trying to do. So you can jump into some of the applications, and trying to make it as real, like we said, as possible is important. Beforehand, most of the time we ask the clients, where do you want to see this brand? Is it going to be an email? Is it going to be an internal presentation, an out-of-home campaign, a website? That's on them to figure out with you. But in this instance, Fluz sends, I would say, daily emails. And so how do you take this illustration, the rest of the brand and this personality into something that feels very tangible? We did the same with tone of voice. We put tone of voice and verbal identity right at the beginning of the project. And so how do you bring that also to life? Because you have to think about this brand as a lot of sort of assets coming together and creating something very special. So it's all about flexibility at this point. You're trying to show a client that you will be able to do things with just typography, and you'll be able to create things that are big and bold. You'll be able to have photos of your customers and your audience. You'll be able just to make it feel quite big and bold on the website. So we start to do a little sort of landing page. There's nothing final about it, but it's selling the dream that you're trying to sell, like I said. Let me just go back a bit bigger. There's also things that are important, particularly when you talk about fintech and you talk about money. It's security, it's protecting your data, is making sure that you're safe in this environment. So you are flexing your voice from something very expressive to something a little bit more functional, like here when you talk about bank level security. You need to make sure that consistency is part of your story. It's not because you talk about security or you talk about feeling sort of safe in this environment that you have to make it boring. You have to make it more serious for sure, but you have to make sure that the DNA is part of that. So anyway, I think you also get what we were trying to do here. So I'm not going to dwell too much on all the details, but you make sure that you start big, and then you start to refine the details and you present something that feels very real. We love going from a physical to a digital space. So out of home and actual sort of phones, being held by people or whatever mock-up you decide, to use for this presentation is important to make it feel real. So this is what we did. Vision 2, Vision 3, I'm not going to go too much into details of it, because if you know the brand that we did, and if you're here today, I suppose you understand that they went with this one right away. But the second vision, it's interesting to talk about it, was built around this money collective. So for this vision, I'm going to read it. We use the language of growth, abundance, and natural connections, celebrating our all for one and one for all mentality. We wanted to create something warm, natural, and connected to highlight how Fluz makes it easy for people to make the money go further together, comparing financial wellness to human and biological growth. I think it kind of makes sense here, what we were trying to do, representing, that growth, this process, this sort of journey of money. And so we did it in a very expressive and unexpected way. You also are selling different visions, so you have to make sure that what you're presenting right now feels very different from the first route. There'll be some overlap for sure, because everything is from the same strategy. So there's so much sort of expression of it that you can do. But yeah, it's important that you are selling something different here. So a little overview of what we were trying to do with this route. And then the third one was around a bit of a personality, which is all I do is win. And so for this vision, we wanted to create a feeling of constant winning. If on every purchase you get some money back, there's something obviously quite positive. You get gains, you sort of level up at this opportunity. It's a bit of that sort of win cycle, right? Where points become money, and then the big money becomes yours, and it's in your bank account. So we build that brand and this vision around the language of video games. It's all about winning. And so we were inspired by All Arcade, where it was very much focused on that idea of winning. So everything that you do, from the choice of type, the colors, the little sort of UI elements, needs to immediately feel like this world, because you don't want people to overthink it. You want to zoom out, and then you want it to be instant. So that's what you do. And it's the same process as route 1 and route 2. You start to flex it. You think about the big, bold moments out of social marketing, and then you start to also think about smaller things: emails, internal presentation, product, etc., etc. So we came up with 3 visions, and they picked route 1, life on max, and they picked it right away in the room. And actually, a funny little story is I start to present, and I do the little intro, and I think probably after visual 1 or 2, the CEO stops me. He's like, I'm going to stop you right there. And I'm like, oh my God, fuck. This is it, game over. Because usually if a CEO stops you after 5 minutes, there's something wrong. And he says, home run, this is absolutely amazing. You got it right. I just want this route. You don't need to present the rest. And I was like, no, we're still going to present the other routes. Amazing. It made the whole presentation a bit better, for sure. The sort of the pressure and the nervosity that maybe we were just thinking is just, gone. But that's a lovely story. So why did they pick route 1? This sort of life on max, right away in the room? Why did they go with this versus route 2 and route 3? They were great. They were quite different. They were telling a very unexpected story, I'd say. But looking back and thinking about it, and thinking about the strategy, and talking about to the clients, the reason why they went with it is because life on max is an attitude. It is very different when you buy an attitude versus when you buy something functional. So that's why you need to go with the vision first and foremost. But life on max is something very emotional. It is something very visual. And so that's the reason why they got really attracted with it. And so that's what we've been doing, since the beginning with Fluz, is try to express this emotion, this attitude, this state of mind, if you may. And the thing that's great about owning an attitude is it's always going to be evolving. I'd say that life on max looks quite different today than it would have been 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And by 2035, 2040, it would have evolved again. It's going to be a very different type of life on max. And in our opinion at Koto, it's not just great, it's essential. You have to build brands on attitude, on feelings, on emotions. The best brands, they don't just look good, they really resonate. And I'd say that's the power of Life on Max. So now you have your vision sold. The client is excited, you've got it. And I'd say that if you have sold that vision, you probably have made it quite distinctive already because you've done your research, you've created it from the strategy, but you need to understand how you can make it even more distinctive if necessary. I'd say that we live in a world where thousands, if not millions, but tens of thousands of new brands are created every day. And as a fintech brand, you can bet that more than the 900 are likely to become your competition. Features get copied quickly. How many of you have seen the swipe, on any kind of app now? It started from Tinder and then Bumble and Hinge or whatever, they've used it, and now you can see it everywhere. Features get copied quickly. Products get copied quickly, but emotion is really hard to copy. That's why no one is competing with Airbnb, because you can copy what they're doing, but the emotion behind Airbnb is really unique. So how do you stand out? I'd say to be distinctive, first and foremost, you need to understand the space you inhabit. You need to make your research. You need to do all of this. You need to go deep. You need to go thorough. You need to look at all the competitors. You need to look at yourself as well, how you use your elements today, photography, logo, social, typefaces, and so on, and so on, and so on, because you're not going to be able to see the opportunity if you don't understand your industry in this world. I also think it's probably the most important thing. To be distinctive, you have to be brave. You have to follow that vision for sure, but you have to take risk. You have to go with a bold opinion. So that the world that we live in right now, everyone is trying to copy each other. We've just said it, whether it's a product or a feature, but most of the time it's also a color or it's a typeface. We've seen that so many times with Klarna. They were really brave and they took a risk to go pink. And now all of the clients that we talk to, they like the color pink. But at the time, it felt very unexpected in a world that was filled in with blue brands. So when others are trying to fit in, you do break away. You need to look different. You need to speak different, and then do the same with how you act and the product that you're going to launch in the future. And that's what Fluz understood. They were thinking, if we want to be seen, if we want to become a leader in this industry, we have to take those risks. And I think we've done it since the beginning. We defined everything from day one. And day one, aka the strategy itself, but also the visual identity. That's why having that strong vision matters, because you set the tone for the direction, and now you just have to refine it. And when we see the brand that we have today, it is so close to what we presented the first day. And the reason why it works is because you had a very expressive logo, something a little bit almost too much, a little bit too maximalized. It felt like 110% expressive versus what other competitors would do. We had this set of illustrations that we did in-house and with their team that felt, once again, quite expressive, unexpected, and abstract. What kind of a sort of fintech brand or bank or brands that is in this sort of money space that has butterfly, heart, flowers, wheels, and lockets? And it's the same with the type and the way we animate things. It feels very expressive, different, and full of personality. And then you do the same, and you go through every single asset that you have as a brand, and you try to make it expressive. We're not saying expressive for the sake of it, because if you want to be very expressive, you would go with a crazy ass typeface. It would make it really expressive and quite wacky. So you need to find the right balance between being expressive and being too much. And so by being distinctive and putting a lot of care into everything that you do, the art direction, the way we're going to shoot it, the illustration, like I said, the colors, the logo, and everything around its tone of voice in general, that's how you stand out. And it's about taking risk. So now you know how to make it distinctive. And in different use cases, in different stories, you're not going to be able to be as expressive everywhere. Sometimes it's only going to be the logo. Sometimes it's going to be the type and the illustration. Sometimes it's going to be something different. But whatever you have, now this is it. This is your vision. This is the beginning of your brand. You have to apply it consistently. Because if you don't do it, what's the point? It's going to be a broken story, and you're not going to be able to create and build awareness. The worst thing a brand can do, in my fair opinion, and I know my fellow colleagues at Koto feel the same, is lose sight of its vision. The difference between a good and a great brand lies in its consistency. Our work exists both in the teeny tiniest pixels, an icon, your phone, whatever, but also 100 feet tall Hanover marketing campaign. So every detail matters. And we did exactly that with Fluz. We were thinking about the smallest expression of the brand, the little pill that is going to appear at 20 pixel, high, the call to action, the hover state, the iconography set, whatever it is that will make your brand, important and the things that you're going to experience, to the big ass, expressive visuals like an out of home. And you have to think about everything in between. Many brands, in our opinion, they fail at keeping the thread between marketing and product. We see very expressive things, and then you look at the product, it looks quite different. It's white, it's boring, it lacks personality. But it is important, even crucial, that the brand experience, what you experience from Fluz, from WhatsApp, from Call of Duty, remains the same and consistent every touch point. Flexibility is really important. There will be times, you've seen it, where you need to be loud, you need to be expressive, you need to grab the attention of everyone like this. Same when you just land on the website, you need to make sure that you create an experience that feels quite compelling so people can scroll out. But there's moments where you need to be a little bit less expressive, a bit more pragmatic and functional. But you can't lose the DNA of what you've just seen before. And the issue here is a lot of people are really surprised to see this. Wow, that's amazing. But that's what everything should be about. And here we're trying just to make it feel a little bit more constrained. There's more white. It's all about the legibility. We're making sure that the call to actions are clear. They're big enough. We work a lot with the product team at Fluz to make sure that the experience was actually enjoyable, but it needs to feel like Fluz. It can't feel like another brand. If you break that, if you make the product feel too functional and too pragmatic, and you lose all of these illustrations and colors and everything else, you kind of lost already. So we did this. We were thinking about every step of the way in the product to make it simple. Like here, how much more whites do you see here that you've seen before? That's fine. But you need to find a little pop. You need to find the moments where it needs to be branded and heroic. So moments of the product that we did, we also did, Fluz parties that feel very much more immersive. We're not going to talk about this today. And then you take it and you flex it and you flex it and you flex it. And you try to make every bit of the experience feels quite special. Even the dashboard, this is the B2B dashboard where you can just check your card, move your money, have the transaction inside. So it needs to be simple to follow, like here. But every step of the way, you need to make sure that you have a bit of the brand so it feels quite special. So that now you understand the flexibility of the brand, you need to understand where it's going to go. Whether it's an internal or an external communication, whether it's going to be functional, immersive, emotional or expressive, whether it's going to be a big launch or just a little small update, a partnership or a new product, an updated feature or a new web page, seasonal merch, or even just a thank you card, they all need to instantly feel like the brand you built. You want to be in a position almost where you hide the logo. That's almost the case here because the logo is quite small on the website. And this is Fluz, or this is Bolt, Distinction, Fitbit, and so on and so on. And that takes a lot of courage. You have to be brave and you have to put care into everything that you create for the brand. So we're going back to it. The typeface, the colors, the art direction, the photos, the illustration, the tone of voice, for sure, all together. So we did that. We started to work with them on their product, the website, social media. You should definitely check it. This is absolutely incredible. We did emails, we did product hunts, video templates, internal presentation. We helped them with their shop. There's so many more things that we did here, but every step of the way, and you can see that on the left, animated by James, so head of motion. It looks great. Even the sales deck feels quite exciting and different. So yeah, this is the story of Fluz. You know, that's how you take a big idea, something that feels very visionary, you make it distinctive, you make it different, and then you apply it consistently to create, we think, something that feels very special and different. Even the merch looks great. Even the most random shit that they wanted to make is looking great and on brand. And that's the power of Fluz. And so you moved away from this that felt quite messy. Uh, it lacked a vision for sure. It felt like it was looking like any other sort of brand in this space to something that feels very opinionated, that has its own personality, and that really stands for something. In summary, the last thing before I'm done is, will everything be perfect and everything will be sorted after this? No, it's more nuanced than that, and you all know this. But I say if you follow those 3 points and you stick to it and you get your clients involved, or if you're your own clients, you just stick to it, you'll be miles ahead of 99.9 probably percent of your competition. You'll stand behind a brand that means something, has an opinion and a strong attitude. And I say that in this world where everything looks the same, that really, really often matters more than anything else. And that's it for me.
Amazing, Alpha. Thank you ever so much. It was really good actually to have sort of a bit of a break from our normal going from, brief strategy, concepts, etc., going much more, honed in on the specifics of the visuals identity specifically, and something we're looking to do more of in future too, which is, I think it's a great start for us to have, more focusing on a specific piece of the process as opposed to everything, because sometimes I know it can be difficult to squeeze it all in that short time too. So it's good to have that more focused look. And as expected, there's plenty of questions from the guy.
Let's do it. I was like, I bet people are going to ask questions like last time, so I just wanted to give them a little bit of time.
Yeah, well, normally that's the thing, isn't it? We always have to end up rushing or missing out questions, so it's good to time. One thing before I dive into those ones, one thing I was interested in is you talk about that emotion, and I also believe that that's really important. But can that come from different sources? Can that be the owners or the founders or the people at the top of the company, or can that be instilled by you as an agency that's working in collaboration with them? Can it be something that's just made up? But
Yeah,
is the consistency that you mentioned, is that the important thing? It's not just used once in a marketing message or on an email. It's got to be referenced regularly to make it have the impact needed.
Yeah. Well, you have to get the team involved. Like if you're selling a vision and they're not interested and it's not compelling and it's not engaging, it's just going to break. And we got really lucky, I would say, with Fluz because the founder and CEO just really believed in the story of the vision. You really believe that you have to talk to people on an emotional level versus functional level. You have to be emotive versus what's the term again? It's not functional. I forgot. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing, but he believed in it. And I think sometimes, yes, there's a lot of sort of hand holding. You need to make sure they understand what is the point and why should people care about it. But it helps to have that team, involved and you have to consistently every day think about a way that you're going to be able to apply this vision. Now, I'm a graphic designer, so I think about it in a visual and a verbal way. There's other things that you can do that is not, visual and verbally sort of led, like the way you're going to act, decisions that you're going to make, also the product that you're going to launch in the future.
Yeah. Well, when you mentioned you were doing the pitching and they immediately liked the first.
Yeah.
From an untrained eye, for us guys that are watching it for the first time, what were the subtle changes that, apart from maybe colour that I could notice, were there any other changes that when you got to the final route, were there anything major or subtle things that you improved upon, even though they liked that first route?
So if that was a long time ago, but between the first creative and the second, so you have the first creative, then you come back with a refinement, and sometimes you have a third one just to make sure that, okay, we're here, let's move into guidelines. I say they just had actual functional questions. How are we going to talk about rewards? How are we going to talk about the community? How are we going to make sure that this system flex? Because it was really based on illustration and photos. So, really understanding this. And the smaller questions like what is going to be the app icon? We suggested that they were just going to do the coin. And it felt very unexpected as well in this space and in this industry where it's either a letter or almost like the symbol of your brand, the bellow for Airbnb. And we were not suggesting that they have a symbol, but just that little coin. And once again, it's all about the process. You need to go through it, explain what is good to be different because you're looking at your phone every day and everything looks the same. And so being distinctive in that space, and you just go straight to Fluz, and that's you can't really see it on my screen, but that's the little coin that looks different than any other app I have on my phone. So yeah, just like small little things, but because we sold that vision, they were in. They loved it. They loved the narrative. They loved the tone of voice. It was very much about refining. And so if you don't start with the vision, you have so much more work to do afterwards to sell that big idea. But they were sold on it. So the way we approach color, the way we approach type made a lot of sense.
Dream client by the sounds.
Yeah, definitely.
And also part of all of that is that what ties all that together, bravery, isn't it? Is for them to trust you to do the right thing, to suggest the right things, for them to commit to that too.
Yeah, and I want everyone to be brave. I do think, and it's particularly in our personal life, I think we try for maybe years and years to fit in. And then at some point you get in your 20s or late 20s and you're like, actually fitting in is terrible. I need to stand out. But you need to accept that not every client is going to be like that. And that's okay. Because maybe the brief, the challenge they're facing or their own growth, where they are in their process or in their growth itself is very different. So we tell a lot, or we share that with the team sometimes, that not everything is going to be like Fluz, and that's totally fine. You need to accept it, and we always try to be brave. We always try to be different because it's core to what we do, but you need to flex.
Yeah, and just before I dive into everyone else's questions, from a project like this and other ones, obviously we've discussed Bolt in the past, but are there people that you collaborate with on projects like this that you haven't got the skills internally at the moment?
It depends on the client. And you have to understand this from the get-go. So Fluz has an amazing team. They have this girl that worked with our illustrator that did hundreds of illustration that you've seen on screen. She was incredible at just taking them and making them exceptional. We sometimes work with teams that have hundreds of designers and thinkers, etc. So you approach the project very different than when we work with two founders. So it was the case when we did The Extinction, that first project I shared with the green brand with dinos running around, worked directly with the founders. So the way you approach delivery, the way you approach the brand and the scalability of it is a very, very different story. But in the example of Fluz, they had a dream team.
Brilliant. Vitor has asked, did you guys show all of these mock-ups and illustrations of the Vision 1 on the first presentation with the client?
Yeah, I actually made it a little bit shorter. So obviously I made Vision 2 and Vision 3 much shorter, as you probably expect. But I've even made Vision 1 a bit shorter because we had, I'd say, 30 to 45 minutes to present this, and it takes an hour to present the whole thing usually. So yes, we did. And we just, we shared to the client, this illustration is not from us. We found it here. This photo is just from this photographer. We don't own it. That's just a normal process. And then they understand it. The refinement is always the moment where you're like, let's just make this shit. If you want to do a photo shoot, here's the people that you want to work with, when you want to do it, what's the plan, same with the illustration, and so on and so on.
Yeah. Joseph has asked, what was the timelines from receiving the brief to presenting the 3 directions?
So that was quite a long time ago now, but say in general with Koto, you do about 2 to 3 weeks of immersion. So you immerse yourself into the product, you meet the founders, you interviews, you do all of your research. And then there's a few weeks of strategy, again, depending on the project. I don't remember. It could be 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And then at this point, you were supposed to be in a really good place where you can start to present the creative. I'd say our projects are most of the time between 3 to 4 months to start just with the brand. And then there's a lot of things that happen. We've been working with Fluz for 2 years. That's why I don't really remember. Because after that, we did the product. And then we did the dashboard, and then we did a website, and then we did multiple shoots, and then we did more illustration, and then we helped them on emails and product hunts, etc. So yeah, it takes longer. But when you love a project like we love Fluz, you just want to work with them for the next 5, 6, 10 years, like we did with Airbnb. James, Joey, and Tim did the rebrand 10 years ago, and then we've been working with them ever since to the IPO. So it's a very different brand along the way.
And I'm right in thinking you started this in London and finished it in America.
I started in London and came here and did it. Yeah.
Joseph, sorry, has also asked as part of that question about the directions. Have you ever had the case where the client doesn't like or is rejecting all of the concepts, and how do you navigate
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, it doesn't happen often, but it does happen. That would be a lie if I said otherwise. I think it's less likely if you do all your research before. Because during the immersion, you will ask all the hard questions to the founders, to the designers, to the intern, to whoever is part of the team. So you're first of all going to understand what is the opportunity in the space, what they're really trying to do. It's not just about reading the brief anymore, it's we're having a deep understanding of it. You do this very thorough audit I've shared in this presentation where you see the competition, you see what they're doing well, what they're not doing well, what the own brand is doing as well. And then you have strategy, and strategy is the thing that will define the future of this brand for the next 10, 15, 20 years, hopefully. And you do a North Star, a why, a vision, a mission, whatever you decide to call it. You move into brand ID. So maximizing your money made so much sense. It was signed off by their CEO, signed off by all the investors, etc. Now you just have 3 ways to express it. And usually if you do your work well, the 3 expressions should make sense. Now, if it doesn't work out, then you start again. And I always say to talents, to clients, we are graphic designers in a way. We're not curing cancer. No one is going to die if we, pick the wrong logo, present the wrong color. And so sometimes you just have to step back, just chill. But if it doesn't go well, you have to talk to the client. You have to jump on a call. They come over to your studio, you come to them, and then you try to figure it out as a team, because it means that there's been something in the communication, something broke somewhere at some point. But it does happen, not a lot, but you have to be ready for it. That's why I got scared, because I presented it. I was like, oh no, what the fuck did we do? And no, it was actually for the best.
Yeah, you just imagine the heart sink just immediately.
Yeah.
When as soon as they stand up or speak up, it's a worrying moment.
I
Isn't
know.
it? I just wanted just a bit of context if anybody's dropped in late, that Arthur's presented today from the visual identity sort of side of things, and obviously there would have been a huge amount of work before we got to you got to that stage. For anybody that's interested in those earlier stages, we do have Arthur kindly presented it about a year ago. Brand identity workshop on their Bolt identity, which includes all of that early phase, doesn't it? So there's those 2 contrasts for the way that Koto approach it. So it's interesting. It's on our site, but just to give anybody context that didn't drop in.
It felt like important just to do it a bit differently, because you could just find this story with Bolt, and so if you're interested in that, it felt nice.
Yeah. Tiers asked how many people would have worked within the team to design this brand.
Okay. So it very much depends on the project and the team, but to start with, a lot of more people worked on it. But so if I remember correctly, we had a client director, also had a junior client on client service on this. We had myself, so creative director, we had a design director, and then 2 or 3 designers, and an motion person. And I think with this kind of team, because you have a really good flexibility of seniority and makers, you can do anything. Now, you bring more talents as you go forward. We brought our internal illustrator working with their own illustrator. We brought our motion person, like I said. We did digital design, so we brought that person in. I forgot, obviously, we did strategy and copywriting. So Alice was behind all of this, and she was absolutely amazing. But then, yeah, depending on the brief that you get going forward, then you bring a different kind of skills as well. But the main team was, yeah, 4 to 5 people, and it grew and grew and grew.
Yeah, I suppose also clients, depending on who they are, like you said earlier, they might have a wealth of people internally too that you can collaborate.
Yeah. When Koto works with Call of Duty, for example, very different briefs, but when we did the actual, rebrand, that was a much bigger team than what we had on Fluz.
Victor has asked about the handoff process, guaranteeing that the client knows everything about the brand. Are there any processes that you do as an agency where you can guarantee as much as possible that once it leaves you, it's then that consistency remains?
Yeah. So there's multiple ways you could do it. First and foremost, guidelines in Figma. We used Figma, I think, for the first time for Fluz. We did the actual presentation, and that was 2 years ago, and the guidelines. And that's absolutely amazing because it feels very different in terms of the process versus InDesign, where you were just like making it, sending the PDF. You don't know where the fucking PDF is going. And now with Figma, they're in the Figma with you, they're sharing comments. You can do little aparté as well, where a designer from your team and someone from their team are testing something on the side. And you can keep on updating it and making sure that they sort of like follow, your recommendation. I'd say that we'll also do a lot of catch up on the guidelines, almost like daily catch up. So we're trying this, we're going to talk about that. So they feel like little presentation per se, and you can make sure that what you're presenting, what you're creating will make sense for the client. The other things that we do, again, depending on the budget and the type of clients, 2 things, we call it a brand guardianship. So brand guardianship is something quite small and light on our hand, where we just jump on a call either every week or every month, and then we review all the work that they're doing. Now, you can make it very formal, like this is a call, this is an hour each, or you just have them on Slack, as we do with everyone. And they send you a little thing, and then you reply at the end of the day, oh, Arthur, I'm trying this email. What do you think? Oh, James, we're doing some motion principles. Can you just give us a hand or just share some feedback? You can go further, and it's more involved, is a retainer. So retainer, I'm not going to go too much into the details of it. You can do it by project, you can do it by time, you can do it by team. But that is lovely because you can help them launch a new product, or you can actually just make the social template, or you can build the email sort of strategy for the next year. But if you don't have the budget, and if you work with a much smaller clients, I'd say the Figma guidelines and a little sort of brand guardianship where you jump on a call weekly or monthly has been very successful for us.
I think we touched upon this last time we spoke. It's more wanting to become more of an extension of their team as opposed to like police.
Right.
Instead of stopping them do's and don'ts, it's about encouraging and empowering them, isn't it?
I also think this is a really good point. When you start working with your clients, I think a sort of formal SOW sort of proposal is important, because you want to make sure you collaborate for sure. You don't want to go away for weeks and come back with a ta-da. They still need to feel involved in this, but you need your space to think. You need to space to follow your process. Once you move into this delivery phase, or retainer, whatever you want to call it, being an extension of their team is very important. So it doesn't have to be as formal anymore. We've done it. We know each other, like the brand is done. Jump on a call, just get them over. We're going to work together for a week. And we do that quite a lot. Even next week, we're going to have one of our clients that is here for a week just to work with us on a different project. But super great.
Kellen, as I hope I pronounced that correctly, you've touched upon the illustrations about their team and your internal illustrator. Just asked about how did you go about tackling such a wide suite of them? Were there anything that you've put in place?
Yeah, so the first thing you have to do with any kind of illustration is, what do you need? And it started, I'm going to give you a really good example. It started with Venmo. The first really big illustrative project we did was Venmo. What kind of illustration do you want to create? No idea. Really, no fucking idea. With Venmo, and I'll go back to Fluz in a second, what we did is build illustrations that were based on data. How are people spending their money on Venmo? Venmo, for people, well, Venmo is a bit of a Monzo of the US. So you can spend money by yourself. You can send money to your friend, and it's almost like a social media where you can see how people spend their money. Anyway, so what we realized is in the data, most people were spending money on pizza, beers, yoga, cinema, etc. So you have your list, you know what you want to do. And so it was the same with Fluz. We followed the same process and asked, what do you need? And so they had very different type of illustrations. So some of them were more functional, which is security, no data breach. I'm making that up, happiness, whatever. I'm again making all of that up. And then we started to think about the most important ones to express. So I'd say the first category was surreal life on max, butterfly, hearts, whatever it is that we did, little birds just sort of flying around. Then it was very much product focus. So looking at the product and what they need. So the sign up, for example, or adding money into your wallet or spending money, etc. And again, I don't really remember exactly the whole process because that was a long time ago, but you need the clients and you need to work together to figure it out. Now you start really small. It's illustration, it's like motion. You need to think about the principles first. So you do probably 1 to 5, maybe 10, and you're like, how's the style? Is it too much? Is it too expressive? Is it not expressive? Is it too literal? Is it too abstract? And then when you're done, then you go through everything else. We had two types of illustration though. We had the sort of spot illustration, again, the butterfly, the lock, whatever it is, and we had the background illustration. So the background illustration, they took much longer to figure out because you want to bring a lot of flexibility into them. You want to make them as different as possible, but they take ages to make. And we wanted a background for a case study, and they have a lot of case study where they meet actual users that tell like how Fluz is making my life better, or as a business, and I'm doing XYZ. So we made hundreds and hundreds of illustrations, and it took weeks and weeks, and they're still making them.
But the result's worth it. It's easy, easy for me to say that, but it does have that real impact, doesn't it? Well, following on from that about illustrations, Will has asked the question, which I think is really important or really interesting based upon what you were saying earlier. Is that about the fintech companies that have or technology companies that will replicate things that work that they see in other organizations and businesses and products. Looking at the style of illustrations that you've introduced for this product or this brand, you worry that this might start to get copied. So from a creative perspective, it could also get copied.
Yeah, it will. It 100% will. It would just have to be real, and we said that to the clients. I'd say the biggest, most recent example of that is Robinhood. Like they go with these weird. Well, actually, it's so funny because the old Fluz was very much copying what Robinhood was doing, but somehow in this space, everyone started to do this. The great thing about going with this attitude, which is life on max, you need to protect the core elements. So you protect the logo, you protect the type, you protect the color. Everything else can move in the future. Not now, because you're trying to build awareness and equity in this brand. But like I said, life on max today will mean something very different in 10 years. And so having this flexibility to update your approach to photography, to illustration, to tone of voice sometimes, because the brand and what the brand and the company they are today is also going to be very different, is important. But it's easier, like I said, to copy a product than to copy an emotion. There's a lot of reason why Fluz should have this illustration style. That goes back to this strategy. That goes back to the brand ID. If anyone else is doing it, it's not going to feel as strong because what is the narrative behind it? But it will probably happen. Yeah.
I suppose that's similar to what you mentioned earlier about something like Airbnb, isn't it? Where there's been replicas since.
Insane.
It has no foundation or basis to be there, has it? It's just
no, because Airbnb has belong anyway.
Yeah.
And it has that incredible, beautiful strategy that is talking to people on this emotional level. Like the people that use Airbnb, they're adventurers. They want to belong in the city that they're in. They want to feel like they live in Paris, they live in New York, and you can probably copy the product itself, but you'll never be able to copy that feeling.
And I think we see that regularly, don't we? It's commonplace, isn't it? People They want the success or the status, but don't want the
Look at the now it's AI, but look at the crypto space for a long time. It was the same. Everyone was black and purple, futuristic illustration, retro futuristic illustration. And the issue is everyone looks the same. And so now we're seeing this in AI. We'll see what comes next.
Going back to Bolt, I think you were one of the first people in our workshop series to have a slide where it shows all the competition, like the logo,
Yeah.
and it was just like it was a sea of the sameness, wasn't it? And then Bolt was just bang, like orange, yellowy, limey, that text.
All blue, like all the same kind of logo, all generic, sort of boring, because they think that to be successful, you have to copy someone else. So they probably all copied PayPal, they all copied Shop, and that's why Bolt felt very different as well.
Yeah. Just in response to CT8EFZ, yeah, I will send a copy out. Please, anybody that would like a copy that might join late, a recording afterwards, please email me hello@rightalignedevents.co.uk and I'll send one out. Sophie has just asked, I think we briefly touched upon this from your perspective, but any tips for brands once you've done the handover for the internal team to maintain consistency? So I don't know if you've had any experience, be it receiving a handover project and working on it from an internal team's perspective. I'm not sure if you'd be able to answer that.
Well, I feel like I kind of answered this a little bit, unless I don't understand the question, but you have to follow up with the client for sure in terms of handover to make sure that is protected and applied consistently. You have to work really hard to make sure the team loves the story. Now, hopefully they would love your narrative and your vision if they bought this and you're in the guidelines. But there's newcomers all the time. There's going to be maybe a new CMO or a new creative director or whoever is a very senior and important stakeholder. Just spend time with them, explain the thinking, why we got to where we got to, show the immersion, show the strategy, make sure that they are proud of this brand, because if they're not proud, if they don't care, if they don't like it, over time, they will actually change it. So I don't know if I'm answering this as I should, but hopefully I did.
Fingers crossed. There's another one there from Natalia, I think, which is very similar to the idea of making sure that the consistency retains. I think there's one last one here. I'm just conscious of time. Just one last one, which makes something I've always been interested to ask, but I don't think I've ever had the courage to join these workshops. But is there, out of the concepts that you've presented, was there one or any elements within the others that you would have picked yourself that you preferred?
I don't have favorite children, so I would say that I'd say that as a team, we believe Route 1, Life on Max was the one for the reasons I've expressed afterwards. Interestingly speaking, the clients said they really like Route 2 as well, but it felt almost too mature for where they are right now. They said if we were 10 years later, or if we were like PayPal, that would have made sense, right? As PayPal, it makes sense because you're not a challenger brand. You're PayPal, and you don't need to be completely wacky. You know, you have like the experience and the expertise of decades and decades, so that would have made sense. They love Route 3 as well. This idea of keep winning, the reward, they say like the community together. So we used a lot of elements from Route 3 into that Route 1. And so what we have done in the end has a bit of both, but it was Route 1 all the way through. And it made so much sense when, you know, you maximize your money, you can live your life on max. And that felt really right as a starting point.
Brilliant. Couldn't have asked for any more, Arthur, as usual. Perfect presentation and explanation about why it all exists and exactly the reason why we do this. I hope everybody that's tuned in has got as much from it as I have, and I hope that you have a great rest of day. I know it's early doors over in NYC, and we're about to clock off without making you jealous. But it's it's a pleasure to catch up again. Hope everybody's enjoyed it, and we'll definitely have to talk again in the near future.
Yeah, thank you, friends, and thank you all for coming.